Nobody has a crystal ball. And
Exactly.
ultimately, there are two factors that are really important when you're thinking about your withdrawal rate. It's what a market's going to do in the future and when you're going to die.
Yes.
And you don't know either of those things, really. You're taking a punt and you've got to do the best you can with the information available.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Personal Investor Podcast. I'm Ed Monk, and I'm joined today by Fidelity's Jemma Slingo to discuss how much income in retirement you can expect your pension savings to produce. Specifically, we'll be looking at what's possible if you've saved £250,000 in pension savings. Before that, let me remind you that if you find this video useful or interesting, to please subscribe to the channel. Give us a like, join the discussion in the comments below. It really does help others find what we're doing here, and it means that you'll get new content as soon as it is released. That all said, Jemma, welcome along. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Now, we're going to look at the retirement income that you can get from £250,000, so a specific number, but clearly we hope that this can be useful for anyone, really. You can just sort of adapt what we're saying to the kinds of savings that they have. 250,000, that is a realistic figure for lots of people. Many of our viewers today and listeners are going to be aspiring to at least that amount of savings when they retire. But it's probably true to say, isn't it, that 250,000 in pensions is probably slightly ahead of what most people end up with.
That's definitely right. So I was looking at the latest government figures, and I think the average pension pot for people approaching retirement is about £140,000. So actually quite a lot lower. But there's a lot of variation within that. Men, for example, tend to have saved a lot more than women, about £90,000 more. So we thought 250k was a decent starting point for this kind of discussion because, as you say, it's realistic for a lot of people. So.
Realistic, it sounds like a very big number. We're going to get into exactly how much it does produce. Before we get into the numbers, though, we should quickly cover off the different ways which this money could be used to actually generate that retirement income. So what are the main routes to do that?
So I do risk oversimplifying this, but there are basically two routes you can go down. You can go down pension drawdown, which is the flexible option, I suppose. So you keep your pension invested and you take income as and when you need it. The invested pot will hopefully continue to grow as you get older, which will sustain you in your later years. But you have a lot of control over what you do with your money, which obviously comes with freedom, but also it's a bit scary because you have to decide exactly how you're going to plan your retirement.
And the overall performance is reliant on what basically your investments do. And they can rise and fall.
Exactly. There is like a big level of risk there, I suppose.
Okay.
On the flip side, you have annuities.
Yes.
So that's basically when you take either all your retirement savings or a chunk of your retirement savings, hand them over to an insurance company, and they guarantee an income for life. And that is nice for some people because you have the security of knowing exactly what you're going to get for as long as you live. But obviously, on the downside, you don't have the same flexibility. If you die younger than you thought you would, that money isn't necessarily going to pass down to your heirs unless you've got sort of very specific arrangements in place.
Yeah.
So you get security at the expense of flexibility.
Okay. And I will just say, because some of our audience are bound to know this, we'll talk about drawdown today, meaning where you keep your money invested and take money from it. There is technically another way, which is very similar, where you're taking lump sums from an uncrystallized pension fund. The tax treatment on that is slightly different, but we just want to square that away. Yes. It does exist as an option, but for the purposes of our conversation, drawdown is what we'll talk about. So let's start there, shall we? What does accessing your pension via drawdown look like, and how much might 250,000 generate in retirement? Okay,
so if you start with your £250,000 pot, regardless of whether you opt for drawdown or an annuity, you get 25% of that tax-free.
Yes.
Up to a certain limit, just under 270k.
Yeah.
So assume you can take that tax-free. So that brings down the numbers. So you end up with a pot of £187,500 to play with. So then you're thinking, okay, well, I've got this money. How do I actually use it to generate an income for me? And that's where something called the 4% rule comes in really, really useful. And that's basically this idea, if you take your starting pot, so this £187,500, and then you take 4% from that and keep taking that every year, adjusting for inflation every year, that should sustain you through retirement for the next 30 years. You won't run out of money, but you'll have, an income to live on. So that is where people might be at.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you work out that, get your calculator out, take the 4%, that would leave you with an annual income of £7,500.
Yep.
Which isn't loads, to be honest.
No.
So you're then in a position where you're thinking, well, okay, could you be a bit more adventurous than 4%?
Yeah.
Could you, for example, up the withdrawal rate to 5%? And in that scenario, you end up with quite a bit more money a year, actually. So it's £9,375 of annual income. So that is where you'd roughly be if you opted for the drawdown route.
Yeah, and so with drawdown, basically the income you get is ultimately up to you, but you've got to balance it against the risk that your money runs out, obviously.
Yes.
And that's why it's a bit difficult to kind of give a prescribed level of withdrawals, isn't it? Because people's finances are going to be different. They might not mind their money running out sooner. They might have things like the state pension to live off, etc. But particularly edging to 5% is where I would say a lot of financial advisors might land if they're looking to give a sustainable amount of income and for your money to last many decades, basically. The reality is it's all going to depend on market returns. And actually, we've done a lot of work over the years looking at sort of sustainable levels of income. We looked at what had happened over the past 10 years. Actually did this work back in April, so a bit out of date. But what's happened in the past 10 years is that you could have sustainably taken not 4 or even 5, but probably 6 or 7% from a drawdown pot. What you always have to bear in mind is that you only know that in hindsight, right? You only know once it's actually happened that was sustainable. But it goes to show drawdown has the potential to produce higher levels of income.
Yes, but nobody has a crystal ball. And
Exactly.
ultimately, there are 2 factors that are really important when you're thinking about your withdrawal rate. It's what a market's going to do in the future and when you're going to die.
Yes.
And you don't know either of those things, really. You're taking a punt and you've got to do the best you can with the information available. Yeah,
and look, I'll just point people to here to previous episodes of the pod where we've spoken about sustainability of that income and what you can do with cash pots, etc., to kind of give yourself a bit of safety around those withdrawal rates. Okay, so we're going to return to those figures, but you basically said to us at 4% it's £7,500 a year on your money. At 5% it edges up to 9,000, almost 9,400. Okay, with a pin in those numbers, what about the annuity route? What can that produce?
Okay, so we're starting with the same pot, 250k. Again, you take that 25%, so you've got 187,500 to play with. Now, annuity rates are a bit tricky because they bounce around all the time. And that's for a couple of reasons. The first is that they're affected by external market forces.
Yeah.
So the rate you get is very closely connected to interest rates, which again, like bond yields, basically. So if interest rates are higher, often you can get a better annuity rate, which is what we've seen recently.
Yeah.
So depending on when you retire, you can see sort of very different prospects ahead of you. The other thing is your personal circumstances. So if you're 67 in really robust health, you will get a worse annuity rate than someone who's, say, 85 with a heart problem, because the insurance company is looking at you and thinking, well, you're likely to live longer, so you're going to be more expensive. So bearing all those things in mind, we looked at what the best annuity rates are at the moment in December. And we found that you could generate an income from an annuity of about £10,600, ever so slightly less than that.
Yes.
So actually, that number is bigger than the numbers we've just been talking about for the drawdown route. Yeah,
I looked at those numbers and it was slightly back of an envelope, but was that 5.6%, something like that? It's around that. So if you wanted some kind of comparison, it is a higher level of income. And that's the option where that income will escalate a bit with inflation, or 3% or something.
So it's 3% a year escalation, and it's assuming you're a healthy 65-year-old.
Yeah. Okay. So broadly comparable with those drawdown figures. So more is the answer there. It hasn't always been the way, has it, with annuity rates? We've had this period of high interest rates in general, which means that annuity returns are higher, but for many years they were down pretty much where those drawdown levels were. And clearly, a very important sort of disadvantage of annuities, whatever their advantages, a disadvantage is that money is no longer yours. So for purposes of passing it on or just having that money in a pinch, it's kind of gone, right? And that's part of the consideration.
Yeah, you surrender a lot of the freedom. I mean, there are ways around passing the money on, I suppose. So you can get, they're called guarantee periods. So that guarantees an annuity will pay out for a certain number of years, even if you die.
Yeah.
So if you got hit by a bus the day after you'd set up this annuity, your money wouldn't just vanish into the ether. But obviously, in exchange for that guarantee period, you'd probably be getting less income from the annuity because, you know, the insurance company, again, is thinking, well, this could be quite expensive for us. We're going to pay them less income in exchange. And obviously, that's just not a problem you have with if you go down the drawdown route, because that money, you know, stays in your possession.
In your ownership. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we've actually got a graphic that we can pull up for those watching online to show the numbers that we've been talking about. Apologies if you are listening to us and not watching on YouTube. We're going to try and explain everything either way. We can see here, Gemma, the different levels of income that these methods produce. I guess we should address the fact that there will be people watching that and saying, well, that doesn't seem very much. Frankly, £250,000 seems a very big number. It's actually quite hard to achieve that. Most people won't achieve that. We've said that. And then to produce, well, you know, £10,500 with an annuity, but down at 7.5 if you're just going to take your 4% from drawdown. I just wanted to have a conversation to contextualize those numbers a bit. They're hopefully not the only income that people are going to have in their retirement, right? You've got the state pension as well. And I don't know where that lands at the moment, but I think a full state pension is now more than £12,000 or approaching that. It will be from next April, perhaps. So you can add that to these numbers. So they're going to edge up towards £20,000 or even more than that. And it's a different ballgame, isn't it, once people move into retirement in terms of their spending. Hopefully they're not saving money anymore. Well, they won't have the need to save money anymore. They're going to live from their savings. So they can actually free up a lot of the money that they do get from income for spending. And so it might not be as much of a sort of reduction in income as these numbers at first suggest.
I think so. I think you don't have to be in a mindset that you have to exactly replicate what you've been earning as an employee or a worker. Housing costs would be quite a big one to think about.
Yes.
We touched very briefly earlier about that 25% tax-free lump sum.
Yes.
And, you know, if you're thinking, okay, you get that, we haven't actually put that to work in the examples we talked about. But it might be a situation where you can use that to pay off your mortgage. So you don't have those regular outgoings.
Or indeed as extra income or, through ISAs or whatever it is. And you know, we're in the business of sort of encouraging people to save for their pension. And hopefully people will look at these figures and say, well, that's actually a pretty good motivation to save what I can when I can and use all the tools, the tax breaks, the company pension contributions, anything that you can do to help you to build up your pot. But what I would say, looking at figures like this, is maybe with a bit of luck, you've got a state pension and this money is on top of that. This is because the overall number might seem low, say an income of £20,000 to £25,000. This extra is really valuable. You know, if the state pension covers the bare necessities, then this is all anything on top of that. And so that extra kind of quality of life that you want in retirement is probably going to come from these savings. So you might look at them and think, they're not very much versus this pot of savings that I have. But actually, in terms of your life and what you can do with that money, it's going to make a big difference, isn't it? It's very important that people do not get turned off by these like potentially low levels of income.
I think so. And also must be quite a weird mindset shift that happens as you shift into retirement, because you spent so much of your life thinking, okay, I'm squirreling money away for a house, for, different points. And actually you reach a point where you're thinking about spending it rather than, storing it away. And obviously you need less if you're not having to make those savings every month. Yeah,
but hopefully good motivation for people to assess actually what they do have saved. I mean, that's a big part of this, isn't it? To actually have an idea of what you save, what you're heading towards, given your like trajectory of savings, and do what you can to maximise that. Okay, Gemma, we have covered absolutely loads there. So let's leave it for now. I will just remind you all that if you found this useful or interesting, to please subscribe to the channel. It means that you'll get updated content as soon as it is released. Give us a like or share the episodes. It really does help people find what we're doing here. That said, Jemma, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.